Welcome to Marketing Deep Dive Podcast, Episode 4.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep into the world of science marketing.
Ooh, interesting.
It's a niche area, right? And you guys sent in this super interesting interview with Elizabeth Schaub, CEO of a science-focused marketing agency.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and she also wrote the book, The Giant Ladder.
Right.
And this interview was on the Life Sciences 360 YouTube channel. Her insights are, well, really insightful. So let's dive in.
Yeah, I think what really stood out to me was how Elizabeth Schaub emphasizes that marketing to scientists, it really is its own unique animal.
Yeah, it's totally different. Like, forget everything you know about selling the latest sneakers or, whatever the hot new gadget is.
Yeah.
This is about cutting-edge science. So what makes it so different? What are the big things that set it apart?
Well, she outlines 3 main hurdles, I think. The first one is all the regulations and compliance stuff.
Oh, of course. It's got to be airtight.
Right. And then you need people with serious technical expertise to even understand what they're talking about.
Makes sense. You can't just fake it in this world.
Exactly. And then the third thing is that the sales cycles are notoriously long and complex. You've got multiple stakeholders involved, lots of hoops to jump through.
So you're not exactly dealing with, like, impulse buys here.
No, not at all. I mean, think about it. If you're trying to sell a lab automation system, you're not talking to the average consumer. Your audience is PhD-level scientists who need hard data to back up every claim.
So you better bring your A game when it comes to the evidence.
Oh, absolutely. Flashy slogans and marketing gimmicks won't cut it here. You need to prove that this thing delivers a real return on their investment.
Okay, so data-driven marketing is key. But then it gets even more complicated, right? Because within the science world, you've got all these different players. You've got your R&D teams, you've got lab managers, you've got procurement officers. How do you tailor your message to each of those groups? They all have different priorities, right?
That's where it gets really interesting. Schaub's agency, they take a hyper-targeted approach because they recognize that each group has different needs. So, for example, R&D teams, those guys live for the deep dive. They want white papers, peer-reviewed studies, all the nitty-gritty details.
They want to geek out on the science.
Exactly. But then you have the procurement officers, and they're all about the bottom line. Cost-benefit analysis, vendor stability, compliance history. They want to know that they're making a safe and sound investment.
So you really have to speak their language. Don't bog down a scientist with financial jargon, and don't bore a procurement officer with a bunch of technical specs.
Right. It's all about understanding your audience. And then you have the lab managers, who are often the end users of the product or technology.
The ones who actually have to make it work day in and day out.
Exactly. They're looking for proof that this new product or technology is going to make their lives easier, that it's going to streamline their workflows, increase efficiency, and ultimately deliver tangible ROI.
So it's about showing them the practical benefits, how it's going to improve their day-to-day operations.
Exactly. And Schaub actually talks about giving those lab managers marketing ammunition.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so they can then advocate for the product within their own organizations. It's brilliant.
It's like empowering your internal champions. Now, speaking of ROI, that's something I think we all struggle with in marketing, right? How do we prove that the money we're spending is actually making a difference?
It's the million-dollar question, especially in a field like science where the results can be less tangible than, say, a splashy new advertising campaign.
Right. How do you measure the impact of something like thought leadership or brand building? It's not always straightforward.
And Schaub really hits the nail on the head here with a 3-pronged approach to demonstrating marketing ROI in science.
3 prongs. Oh, I'm listening. Lay it on me.
The first prong is all about quantifiable KPIs. We got to ditch those vanity metrics like website clicks and likes and really focus on the metrics that matter. How is your marketing impacting the sales pipeline? Is it generating qualified leads? Is it actually resulting in revenue?
Show me the money. I love it. Data-driven all the way. What's the second prong?
Okay, so the second prong focuses on shortening those notoriously long sales cycles we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah. Those can be brutal.
Schaub's argument is that we can use really targeted, well-crafted marketing materials to proactively answer those common questions, address concerns up front, and smooth out the whole process.
So it's like anticipating those roadblocks and clearing them before the customer even trips over them.
Exactly. You're making the sales journey as smooth as possible. And then the third and final prong
I'm on the edge of my seat.
is all about building long-term brand equity. Schaub acknowledges that not everything has to have an immediate dollar value attached to it. Building a strong, reputable brand takes time, and it's an investment that will pay off in the long run.
So it's about playing the long game, building that foundation of trust and credibility that will make it so much easier to connect with your audience when you do have a specific product or service to promote.
Exactly. It's like planting seeds that will eventually grow into a thriving forest.
I love that analogy. So we've talked about the unique challenges of science marketing, the ROI dilemma, but what about the power of storytelling? We see it everywhere in consumer advertising these days. But does it have a place in the B2B science world? I mean, are scientists really swayed by emotional appeals? Wouldn't they just prefer the cold, hard data?
It's a great question. You see all these pharmaceutical ads on TV now, tugging at your heartstrings with these elaborate patient stories. But those are aimed at a general audience. Do scientists really respond to that kind of emotional marketing?
It seems like a tough crowd to win over with tearjerker commercials.
Well, Shab actually has a nuanced perspective on this. She believes that emotional connection is crucial, but it manifests differently in the science world.
So it's not about manipulating emotions, but more about building trust and rapport.
Precisely. You're not trying to make them cry, you're trying to make them feel confident in your expertise and your ability to solve their specific problems. And that's where storytelling comes in. It's a way to build your brand on an intellectual level, establish thought leadership, and resonate with your audience's values.
I see. So instead of tugging at heartstrings, you're appealing to their intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
You're showing them that you understand their challenges and have the solutions they need.
You got it. It's about making that connection on a deeper level, not just throwing data and facts at them. And Schaub makes a great point about avoiding irrelevant personal anecdotes when targeting scientists. No one wants to hear your life story. They want to see the value in the data.
Okay, so keep it relevant and data-driven.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about trade shows. They're a staple in so many industries, but Schaub seems to have some pretty strong opinions about how to make them work for science companies.
She does. And she uses this fantastic example of Intuitive Surgical, a company that makes robotic surgical equipment. Instead of having a typical booth setup, they actually brought their equipment to a conference for live demos.
Wow, so people could experience the technology firsthand, not just read about it in a brochure. That's thinking outside the booth.
Exactly. Shab really drives home the point that creativity and ROI can go hand in hand, especially when it comes to trade shows. Don't be afraid to invest in something that makes your booth stand out.
So it's worth spending a little extra to create a truly memorable experience, something that will leave a lasting impression.
Absolutely. And she's also a big advocate for podium presentations. If you can snag a speaking slot, it's an amazing opportunity to reach a wider audience and really position yourself as a thought leader in your field.
It's like having a captive audience of potential customers and collaborators.
Precisely. But even if you're stuck with a booth, there are still ways to make it interactive and engaging. You can do live demos, incorporate video content, even host mini events within your booth.
I remember seeing a software company doing live demos at a conference a while back. They had these workstations set up where people could sign up for 20-minute slots to try out the software. It was a brilliant way to generate leads and get people excited about the product.
That's a perfect example. And it doesn't always have to be super high tech. Shab tells the story about how one time her team built a massive video wall for a trade show because they couldn't find one to rent. It's about finding those creative solutions and being willing to experiment a little.
That's awesome. It's about thinking outside the box and finding what works, even if it means getting your hands dirty.
Right. So trade shows can be incredibly valuable for science companies, but you have to be strategic, you have to be creative, and you can't be afraid to break away from the tired old booth and brochure formula.
I love that. No more boring booths. And here's something I found really fascinating about Shab's business model. She runs a global agency, but doesn't have fixed headquarters.
That's right. Her team is fully distributed with employees all over the world. And she herself has lived in something like 26 different countries. It's incredible.
Wow, 26 countries. That's amazing. But logistically, how does that even work? I always assumed that most marketing agencies were clustered in those major biotech hubs like Boston or San Diego.
That's the traditional model for sure. But Schaub has embraced the power of remote work, and she highlights all these benefits to this approach. For example, they have lower overhead costs, which allows them to offer more competitive pricing.
So everyone wins. They save money, And their clients save money.
Exactly. Plus, they have a distributed team, which means they can provide round-the-clock client support because there's always someone online somewhere in the world.
Makes sense. It's like having a global team of superheroes ready to tackle any marketing challenge at any time.
That's a great way to put it. And they're able to attract and retain top talent who might not want to be tied to a specific location.
I can definitely see the appeal of that. Flexibility and work-life balance are so important these days.
Absolutely. And because they're not limited to hiring people in a particular geographic area, they have access to a much wider pool of talent and expertise.
So they're not just breaking geographical boundaries, they're breaking down barriers to talent. I love that. So it's like this innovative, flexible business model that benefits everyone involved.
Right. And it really challenges the status quo of how we think about work and the traditional office environment. I think Schaub's approach is a sign of things to come.
I agree. It's exciting to see companies like hers paving the way for a more flexible and dynamic future of work. Now, we've covered a lot of ground already, but we haven't even touched on Schaub's book, The Giant Ladder, yet.
That's right. We still have lots to unpack there. What I found particularly interesting is how she addresses this common pitfall she sees with scientists and engineers who venture into the world of entrepreneurship.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Let's hear it. I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to this.
So many brilliant scientists and engineers, they get so caught up in the amazing technology or the groundbreaking research they're doing that they assume its value is self-evident.
Right. They think if we build it, they will come.
Exactly. But that's rarely the case. And that's where marketing comes in. Without a clear, compelling narrative that resonates with potential customers and investors, even the most brilliant ideas can get lost in the noise.
So it's not enough to just have a great product or technology. You need to be able to communicate its value effectively.
That's where those marketing superpowers come in handy. And that's what Schaub's book is all about. It's about helping scientists and engineers bridge that gap between brilliant science and effective communication. It's about helping them tell their stories in a way that resonates with their target audience.
It sounds like a must-read for any scientist or engineer who wants to make a real impact with their work.
Absolutely. It's a game changer.
Well, I'm definitely adding The Giant Ladder to my reading list. Where can our listeners find it?
It's available on Amazon, Audible, pretty much all the major retailers. And here's a cool bonus. If you're a student or on a tight budget, you can reach out to Schaub's team and they'll send you a free PDF. She's really passionate about making this information accessible to everyone.
That's so generous of her. And the icing on the cake is that the profits from her book go to support animal rescue charities all around the world.
I love that. It's a great reminder that business can be a force for good.
Okay, before we move on, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. We've been talking about how important it is to market a product or service effectively, but what about marketing yourself?
Ooh, that's a good one. I like where you're going with this. Let's unpack that after a quick break.
We're back, and we were just starting to get into this idea of how we can apply these marketing principles to, well, ourselves.
Right, like marketing our own expertise.
Exactly. Because it's something I think a lot of scientists, researchers really struggle with, especially in such a competitive world.
It's so true. Like everyone wants to be seen as the expert, right?
Yeah.
But in a world where everyone's vying for attention, how do you make your expertise stand out? How do you become that go-to person in your field?
Right. It's almost like we need to start thinking of ourselves as a product to be marketed, which feels kind of weird, right?
It's a shift in mindset for sure. But if you think back to what we were just talking about with Elizabeth Schaub, it all boils down to a few key things. Understanding your audience, showing your value, and finding creative ways to connect with the people you want to reach.
So those principles apply whether you're marketing a tangible product, a service, or even just your own knowledge and skills.
Exactly. So the first step is to really think about who your target audience is. Who are you trying to reach with your expertise? Is it potential collaborators? Is it funding agencies? Industry leaders? Who are you trying to impress, basically?
And then once you know who you're talking to, you need to figure out what value you bring to the table.
Right.
What are your unique skills, your knowledge, your perspective? What makes you different?
Right. It's all about framing your expertise in a way that resonates with that specific audience. So highlight your accomplishments, showcase your thought leadership, and show them how you can solve their problems or help them achieve their goals.
It sounds a lot like personal branding, which I know is kind of a buzzword these days, but it makes sense in this context.
It totally does. And just like with any brand, you need to find ways to connect with people on an emotional level. I know that might sound a little fluffy for the science world, but hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening. Convince me.
It's not about getting all sentimental or sappy. It's about building trust, credibility, and a sense of shared values. It's about making people feel like they know you, like you, and trust your expertise.
I get it. But how do you actually do that in a field like science, where data and objectivity are so important?
It can take many forms. It can be how you write, how you speak, your online presence, even your personal interactions. It's about being authentic, letting your passion for your work shine through.
So it's not just about what you know, it's about who you are and how you connect with people.
Exactly. But remember, you have to be strategic about it. Just like with any marketing campaign, you can't be everything to everyone. So focus on your niche, your unique value proposition. What makes you stand out from the crowd?
And don't be afraid to experiment and try different things. See what works, what resonates, and keep refining your message along the way.
Totally. It's an ongoing process, just like any other marketing strategy, but the rewards can be huge. Imagine being known as the leading expert in your field, the person everyone turns to for insights and advice.
That's the dream, right? To have your work recognized and valued by your peers. And it all comes back to these core marketing principles we've been talking about. It's really cool to see how they can be applied to our own careers.
I agree. And it doesn't matter if you're a scientist, an engineer, or anyone else with specialized knowledge to share. You can take a page from Elizabeth Schaub's book and learn how to effectively communicate your value to the world. Understand your audience, demonstrate what you bring to the table, and tell a compelling story.
I love that. And who knows? Maybe you'll even end up as a guest on a podcast like this one someday, sharing your expertise with the world.
Now, that would be something. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think there's another important piece of this puzzle we need to address. We've talked a lot about the power of storytelling, but is there a danger of taking it too far? Could too much emphasis on the story actually overshadow the science itself?
That's a great question. It's a delicate balance for sure, and one we should definitely dive into. We're back and ready to tackle that question we left hanging. Can we go too far with storytelling in science? Could the story end up overshadowing the scientific substance itself?
It's a fine line to walk, that's for sure. We definitely don't want to compromise scientific rigor or accuracy just to tell a captivating story. We have to respect the integrity of the science above all else.
Absolutely. It's not about making things up or exaggerating results. It's about finding creative ways to communicate sometimes complex scientific concepts in a way that resonates with a wider audience.
It's like we're building a bridge, using storytelling as the connection point between those intricate scientific details and a broader understanding.
I like that analogy. And just like with any good bridge, transparency is key. We need to be upfront about our methods, our sources, the whole 9 yards. No oversimplifying, no exaggerating claims. Credibility is paramount in science. It's the bedrock of trust.
Couldn't agree more. Building trust with a scientific audience means being honest and open, even if it means acknowledging limitations or uncertainties in the research. It's about presenting a complete picture.
Warts and all.
Exactly. And, a compelling story doesn't always have to be some big dramatic saga. Sometimes the most effective stories are the ones that simply explain the science clearly and concisely, letting the facts speak for themselves.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, right? Especially in the world of science.
Absolutely. The world of science is full of these amazing discoveries and breakthroughs that are already fascinating on their own. They don't need any embellishment.
So well said. I think the takeaway here is that storytelling can be an incredibly powerful tool when communicating science, but it's a tool that must be used responsibly and ethically. Our ultimate goal should always be to illuminate, not to obscure or mislead.
Couldn't put it better myself. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into this fascinating world of science marketing. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've uncovered so much: the unique challenges of reaching a scientific audience, the importance of proving that ROI, the power and responsibility of storytelling, and the need for both creativity and a strong ethical core in everything we do.
And we owe a lot of this newfound understanding to Elizabeth Schaub. She's a true trailblazer in the field, and her insights are just invaluable for anyone looking to connect with those bright minds that are driving scientific progress forward.
If you're ready to learn more from Schaub herself, I highly recommend checking out her book, The Giant Ladder. It's chock full of practical advice, inspiring stories, and you can find it on Amazon, Audible, and most major retailers. And just a reminder, if you're a student or you're on a tight budget, reach out to Schaub's team, and they'll send you a free PDF. She's incredibly generous and committed to making this knowledge accessible to everyone.
And don't forget, the profits from her book are going to support animal rescue charities around the world. What a fantastic way to give back.
I love that. So until our next deep dive adventure, keep those curious minds engaged, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions.